Okay, moving on. We will now have the address from experience from Scottish Green Party co-leader Patrick Harvie. Patrick is a fearless campaigner for the climate, independence, and human rights, and possibly most famous for the time when a parliamentary inquiry formally cleared him of blasphemy after he managed to annoy Donald Trump on Twitter. Hi, Patrick.
Thank you very much. I suppose I knew when I saw the programme what a tough act Karine Polar was going to be for me to follow. No politician has a voice anything like as inspiring as Karine's voice, but I'll just have to do what little best I can. We've all been getting used to a weird way of working, so welcome to my flat in Partick. This is, everybody's been getting used to their living room or their kitchen or their bedroom being their office as well. This has been my office for the last year. It's also been my debating chamber and my committee room and occasionally my TV studio. And I've appeared from here so often that the Daily Mail have taken to describing this view as the sofa of doom. So welcome all of you to my sofa of doom. And thank you for inviting me to give the toast from experience. And it occurred to me when I was asked to do that there is an implication that I am rapidly approaching the codger category within the Scottish Green Party. I'm happy to take that on. And so I had a little bit of a look to see what Burns would say about growing old. There was one poem that I found that was really rather depressing about growing old and about living in general. But this verse was someone who said, "I spied a man whose aged steps seemed weary, worn with care. His face was furrowed o'er with years, and hoary was his hair." So I think I'm safe at least on that front. I was going to begin, though, by reflecting a little bit on my experience of having been, but if you can believe it or not, once upon a time, when I was young, elected as one of the youngest MSPs in Parliament at the time. There were 4 of us, and albeit in those days the youngest MSPs were 30 rather than anyone in their 20s in these days. But that cohort of 30-year-olds, I was looking at where they all are now. One of them, of course, Mark Ruskell, is back in Parliament. Another one, Mark Ballard, another Green MSP in that second session, has been doing policy work in a range of NGOs and policy organisations, mostly with young people, or advocating on behalf of young people. And the fourth of that cohort of 30-year-olds, Jeremy Purvis, is now firmly ensconced in the House of Lords, and he seems to have already adopted the appearance of a 65-year-old from the 1950s. If I was cruel, I would suggest that was kind of always the way he was, but he was clearly destined for the Lords, and that's where he's doing his thing now. And of course, our group is younger than the average, mostly because of Ross bringing the average down. Although when Cami Glasgow was selected as our youngest parliamentary candidate ever, not so long ago, Ross was sitting dejected in the chamber, commenting to me on how old he's feeling now that the young Greens are looking on him as a senior. But believe it or not, I am still just about younger than the average member of the Scottish Parliament. So I'm going to cling on defiantly to that claim that I'm still one of the young ones, whatever the invitation to give the toast from experience implies. I was thinking as well about some of the advice that I was first given when I was elected, and there was a well-meaning journalist. He'd been doing political journalism for decades by this point. He was a friend of my dad from when my dad used to work at the BBC. So he was pretty long in the tooth by this point and already, pretty cynical and experience. And he decided to give me the benefit of his wisdom just in the first week or two after I was elected, where I was already getting interested in advocating on the issue of civil partnership. Civil partnership, just in case you've forgotten, is that thing same-sex couples had before we were allowed to get married. And this journalist, I think well-meaning, I think genuinely intending to be helpful, advised me that I shouldn't go anywhere near it as an issue, because I would end up just being labelled as just the gay one. I decided at that time that I would politely decline that advice. And so if it's not a circular argument, one of the bits of advice that I would give to those who are going to reply from Exuberance is you don't need to listen to the advice of people who've got more experience. Very often it's experience of how things used to be, not of how things need to be. There are really big issues about the generations, the relationship between the generations that I've had to reflect on in every session of the Scottish Parliament. And every session of the Scottish Parliament that I've been in has been different. Everyone has faced ever bigger challenges: economic injustice, climate injustice. And as Greens, very often we are here to draw attention to the even bigger challenges that lie ahead while still trying to inspire hope. That's a really difficult balancing act to strike. And as we look at the generational injustice that exists in the world around us, we need to be hopeful. We need to find ways to show that things can be better, rather than just talking about how big the challenges are. Never trying to downplay the challenges ahead of us, but always trying to inspire hope. I wanted to reflect as well in this toast from experience about an inspirational figure in my life, my mum, because she was a Green activist decades ago, before there was any proportional representation, before there was any real chance of getting people elected in this country. And at the age of nearly 80 now, she's still going strong as a campaigner. In fact, the last time that I was arrested at Faz Lane, the two of us were locked arm in arm together and got carried off by some lovely policemen. So the image that I wanted to leave you with in this toast from experience is a wonderful opportunity that I had. And I honestly can't remember if it was early last year, just before the lockdown, or if it was the year before that. It's all gone into a bit of a blur for me. But I had the extraordinary opportunity to introduce her as a speaker at a rally organised by the school climate strikers in Glasgow. And that sense of, you know, these incredible, passionate, energetic, activist young people organising an inspiring movement and asking me to speak as an MSP, but then seeing that I wanted to call back on the generation before me as well. Because if people around the world had listened to campaigners of my mother's generation at the time, the challenges ahead of us now would be so much easier. We've made them more difficult by taking all of that time of inaction. So the only way that I really feel qualified to give a toast from experience is to ask you all to toast my mum's inspiration and the fact that she's still going strong and still saving the world. So I ask you to join me in that toast.
Patrick's mum.
And now it's going to be over to the youth. And so I thought I would give another little quote from that same poem, that same Burns poem. O man, while in thy early years, how prodigal of time, misspending all thy precious hours, thy glorious youthful prime, alternate follies take the sway, licentious passions burn. So over to you now. Don't let us down on that.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. I'm just about the same age as Patrick, so I was gonna show sympathy with the voice of experience there, but since he's categorizing himself as still the voice of exuberance. I think I can squeak under that barrier as well. Yay! But I am a bit trepidatious about the reply from the exuberance, because this is being delivered by 3 up-and-coming stars in the Edinburgh Green Party. We have Yasmin Luqman, Ben Parker, and Emily Frood. All 3 of them do considerable work for the branch and our campaigns. Yasmin is working in comms and media for the Holyrood campaign. Ben is currently co-convener of the Edinburgh branch, and Emily is one of our list candidates. Over to you, Exuberance.
Thank you to Patrick for sharing your experience. I feel really lucky, but also terrified to be the next to speak, but here goes. I can count the number of Burns nights I've attended on one hand. My experience of toast involves smashed avocado and sea salt on top, not so much Robert Burns and Scottish traditions. However, I'm really grateful to have been invited to speak and to reflect on my experience as a relatively new member of the Scottish Greens and also a young member. We've all joined the Greens from different paths and for a variety of reasons. Some of us have been involved in environmental activism and lefty parties for years and years, and others, myself included, naively thought that mainstream neoliberal parties, cough, the Democratic Party, cough, would save the world from fascism, racism, and capitalism. Others have even joined within the last month because of our commitment to human rights, and you're welcome with open arms. I'm sure many of us can fondly reflect upon the beginning of our green journeys and the steps that we took to getting more involved. One particular rite of passage is being added to what seems like endless Slack groups. You know when something's wrong if you check your phone and shows no new Slack notifications. Another rite of passage is getting involved during election season and going out canvassing and leafleting. Do you remember when that was a thing? It's totally normal as a new member of any party and organization to feel so bewildered and confused by new manifesto and party guidelines, and to feel so lost meeting so many new faces and having to remember loads of new names. Most of us feel gradually more comfortable and confident when we meet other members at meetings and conferences, when we're out on the streets campaigning, and when we're socializing with our fellow Green pals. This year has been difficult for those of us who joined the party or became a bit more involved under lockdown. When Ben, Emily, and I were planning our speeches the other day, we realized we actually haven't met in person before. Looking at this a bit more positively, it will be such a wonderful reunion when we're able to meet and to organize it in person again. And it's truly incredible that we've all contributed to making a splash, or rather a green wave, in Scottish politics while organizing via Zoom and Slack. I finally want to reiterate the point that while I still consider myself to be at the beginning of my green journey, I've quickly learned that there's no one way to be a green. Everyone's path is unique and shaped by their values and identities, and we've all come together to make Scotland an even better place to live. So that being said, I'd like to now pass the virtual mic to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. So when I was first approached by John Palmer about taking part in this event, I was standing in a car park and I was giving out leaflet runs for the Craigentiny-Duddingston by-election, which we had in November. And at the time, apologies to John, but my head was a little bit too full of other things. So I agreed to help out without even giving this whole thing too much thought. So a few days later, John passed over the brief, which was very exciting. And that brief was to deliver this reply from Exuberance at the Burns Supper. Now, as you can probably tell, I'm not from Scotland. As a Yorkshireman, I too, like Yasmin, didn't really know anything about Burns Night. And to be honest with you, I also didn't even know what the word exuberance meant. But not somebody to turn away from a challenge, I decided instead to roll up my sleeves, read up a little bit on Burns Night, pull out the dictionary, and discovered that exuberance, for those of you who don't know, is the youthful quality of being full of energy, excitement, and cheerfulness. Now, as great as it was to be armed with that information, it did leave me a little bit confused. We were coming off the back of a very busy by-election campaign. We were in the midst of a Holyrood election, and I did have to ask myself, does being involved in party politics make me feel youthful, energized, excited, and cheerful? After all, one quick glance at Patrick and all his experience might be forgiven. You might be forgiven for thinking that party politics actually just leaves you looking a little worse for wear. So I was still puzzling over this when I spoke with Emily and Yasmin about how we were going to deliver our reply together. But in fact, it was actually through that process of exchanging ideas about the speech when I kind of realized what I understood exuberance to mean and exactly what it was that I wanted to talk about tonight. So firstly, Yasmin absolutely is right that there is no one way to be a Green. We do all come to this party with all kinds of different backgrounds, ideas and experiences. And it's exactly that which I think makes our politics so strong. In the Greens, we work together. And I think that's where the exuberance, that's where the energy, the excitement, the cheerfulness come in. I was thinking a lot about the by-election campaign that's just gone, and I genuinely have lost count of the number of intelligent, insightful, thoughtful people that I work with. And I lost count of the number of lessons that I'd learned as part of that campaign as well. So whether it was working with Margaret and learning together how to use mail merge and send files off to the printer in the right format, which actually is a lot more difficult than you think it might be, or if it was the hours, and I do unfortunately genuinely mean hours of outtakes from the social media videos that Colin and I made, or even if it was, taking hairstyling tips from Patrick before the videos as well. At every single corner, there was something more to learn about how we do politics in the Green Party. And there was such an enjoyment to be had with that as well. So I think when we're talking about exuberance tonight in the party, we're not just talking about being youthful. We're not just talking about being cheerful and energetic in ourselves. Instead, I think what we're talking about is the energy and the dynamism which comes from being part of a group of people who each have got so much to share and so much to learn from one another. For me, I think exuberance is that excitement of working together on the common goal that we all share, which is to make the world a better place. So yes, it probably does make more sense talking about exuberance from the lovely, fresh faces in the party that we have here. But in reality, it is so much more than that, I think.
I was pretty exuberant about going last, but having heard Ben, Yasmin, and Patrick the Codger speak before me, perhaps I should have said otherwise. And being from Australia originally, I've never even been to a Burns supper, let alone read at one. The organisers really managed to wrangle 3 non-Scottish Greens to do a Burns night reply. Nonetheless, both Yasmin and Ben both speak to the greatness of the Scottish Greens and the amazing power New Blood has in guiding a movement towards its end goals of liberation for the planet and all its people. Although actually, Ben, can I call you New Blood, even though you've been a member for 6 years now? I'm kidding. With that in mind, though, I want to express my hopes and dreams for the Scotland we want to envision. I want a Scotland driven by empathy, of inclusion and of equity. I want a Scotland independent, free from Johnson's tyranny. I want a Scotland arm in arm, not selling weapons to armies. I want a Scotland learning lessons, unpacking its colonial history. I want a Scotland for all, striving for accessibility. I want a Scotland back in Europe, a win for the international community. I want a Scotland molded by the people, not led on by greedy companies. The Scotland I want can only be created when we give thanks to the experienced ones who have come before us, the older Greens who have fought their whole lives for the life of planet Earth since before I was even born. And I'm 22, so have I made you feel old yet?
Yes.
The feminists who have burned bras and stuck it to the man for a place in society, the campaigners who have fought for peace against the wars of the world, the activists of colour who have sought their own justice that has been too long ignored, the LGBT people who have been political the moment they come out, everyone who has paved the way for us to be here, thank you. The Scotland I want can only be created when we identify those who have the exuberance to carry forward the mission we pass to them. And with that in mind, I want to give a quick cheers to all of the Green candidates we have running for Holyrood in May. We have your back. And another cheers to the activists even younger than I am, the kids and teens, who will be the adults of tomorrow, who are already demanding change in the world, the climate strikers who make even 22-year-old me feel old and past my prime. Still, much like Ben, Yasmin, and I did for this reply, you band together and make the most of it. You strive to make the best, funniest, most inspiring reply from exuberance as per the very strict and specific brief given to us that must not be deviated from. Hold on, sorry. I mean the most inclusive, socialist, independent green Scotland to ever existed. I was reading the wrong notes. Nevertheless, there is no big green rulebook. There is a big book of green policies though, and if you don't agree with those, you're probably not very good at being a green member. My point is that we should all be exuberant. It's not just it's not something that gets passed down from generation to generation like a family heirloom. We're all experienced in our own way. And when we learn from each other, we can create the most incredible changes for Scotland and the planet. Slán Siva from experience.
Exuberance. Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I definitely like that format much more. And I am always so excited when I meet all the young Greens and their talent and energy and organizational skills. It blows me away. I think we're really onto something in the Scottish Green Party. The kind of transition we've had toward having so many talented young members, it gives me enormous hope for the future. I almost can't wait to kind of put down my Slack codes and let you guys crack on with it. Not quite yet. You're not burying us quite yet, but soon, one day soon.
Well, I'm feeling young again, frankly.
Excellent, good, that's us, youngest MSP group. Woo! Okay, we're gonna move on to our next performer. So this is Mote Parrott. Mote was born in Cameroon and has a local name. He's